string of adjectives. But I suppose the comments of that man who was experiencing that sense of letdown in the United States, in a certain sense, kind of echo the kind of grief and disappointment that a lot of Americans are feeling today, including myself. I think in these kind of dark times for our country, in which our country and our professional organization appear to have lost their moral bearings, it can be very, very demoralizing and discouraging, and can evoke a certain kind of numbness or sort of psychic numbing or apathy or moral complacency in us, because it just seems so big and so impossible to change, and what could we possibly do about it? A kind of helplessness and hopelessness that it can kind of induce in us. But I think for me, one encouraging development is that both in terms of the sort of national scene as well as within our field of psychology, is that there seem to be all kinds of people coming forward who seem to be experiencing a kind of a vocation to engage in dissent or principled opposition or resistance against some of these misguided policies, whether they be the misguided policies of the Bush administration or the misguided policies of the APA. And I think I'm particularly interested in a way the affective dimensions of conscience, the heart dimensions, how our feelings can we can sort of consult our feelings as a kind of a guide in ethical decision making. But I think the initial stirrings of such callings, you might call it refer to it as the call of conscience or the call to conscience, I think are often first experienced as a kind of a stirring of the heart. You know, feelings of anxiety or uneasiness or queasiness about the direction of things. Shame. Not feeling proud of our profession, not feeling proud of our country. Grief and sadness. Anger, rage. These kinds of feelings, I think, are very, very important to listen to and pay attention to in ourselves and in others. So I think they give us very important information and potential direction and guidance as to where we should go with them or how we could possibly channel them. And I think you could see these kinds of feelings as unsettling and as uncomfortable as they are as the kind of echoes of the inner voice of conscience within ourselves, kind of resonating within our own minds and hearts. So it's important to take them seriously and take note of them, be consciously aware of them, meditate on them, think about their implications for action and what we could do about them, just as we would pay attention to feelings in some dimension of our personal lives. And really, if you think about it, our consciences these days, as Americans and as psychologists, should be uneasy. You know, our hearts really should be troubled. Because I think that these kinds of feelings are indicators that our consciences are in working order, that we have a heart, that we're human. Reverend William Sloane Coffin once said famously, "The quickest way to lose your humanity is to begin to tolerate the intolerable." The quickest way to lose your humanity is to begin to tolerate the intolerable. And I think sadly it goes without saying that the APA leadership has begun to tolerate the intolerable, to rationalize it, to make excuses for it, to try to put a good face on things that are ugly and mean. And I think all of these kind of rationalizations and excuses that we hear for allowing and even encouraging psychologists to be involved in consulting to or assisting with interrogations in disgraceful places like Guantanamo Bay, where human rights are systematically denied to detainees and systematically violated is shameful. We really should be ashamed of this. Guantanamo Bay has become kind of a global symbol of cruelty and injustice that really sort of taints our reputation, tarnishes our reputation as a country, and the fact that psychologists are sort of encouraged to even be there in these interrogation roles, I think is just it's a disaster. It's a disaster, not just in the sense of a public relations disaster for the APA, but it's an ethical disaster. It's an ethically disastrous position. So I find all this profoundly embarrassing and infuriating as a psychologist who feels like my organization should do better, and very discouraging. Because I think in a certain sense what happens is that we as members of the APA become complicit in the immorality and criminality of the Bush administration's whole sort of extra-legal system of detention and processing and interrogation of detainees. So I have been making all of my own personal efforts to be more involved in this issue and to do the best I can to express dissent, to use my voice to raise some hell, which I think is perfectly justified in this situation. I believe that Frank and Brad recently decided to withhold their APA dues this year. I've recently made a decision to withhold my dues this year too, so when the thing comes up in December, I will write a letter to the various powers that be to explain why I don't feel that I should be writing a check to an organization that lets me down so much. So, in any case, that's what I have to say today.